Welcome back. We've just begun to peel back the layers of this Trump-Rogan interview.
Yeah,
And believe me, there's a lot more to discover.
I'm still reeling from that whole the yips analogy for Lincoln. It's so unexpected, yet it kind of works.
Right.
It reminds you that even historical giants were human, with doubts and insecurities.
Absolutely.
And speaking of insecurities, Trump's survival narrative really stood out.
Yeah.
He paints this picture of himself constantly under attack, fighting against all odds just to keep his head above water.
Yeah, it's a potent narrative.
Right.
He positions himself as the underdog, the champion of the people battling against a corrupt and powerful establishment.
Yeah.
And it resonates deeply with folks who feel like the system is rigged against them,
Right.
who feel unheard and unseen by the powers that be.
But couldn't you argue that any president faces intense scrutiny and criticism?
Sure.
Isn't that just part of the job?
Yeah, but Trump takes it to another level.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't just disagree with his critics.
Right.
He demonizes them.
Yeah.
He paints them as enemies,
Right.
traitors,
Yeah.
part of a deep state conspiracy against him and the American people.
Which brings us back to his constant attacks on the media. He calls them crooked, dishonest,
Right.
and accuses them of deliberately misleading the public.
Yeah.
He even goes so far as to allege outright fraud by 60 Minutes for editing an interview with Kamala Harris.
Right. This relentless assault on the credibility of the media is one of the most troubling aspects of his rhetoric.
Right.
It erodes trust in institutions that are essential for a functioning democracy.
Yeah.
And it creates a climate where people are more likely to believe conspiracy theories and misinformation
Right.
simply because it confirms their existing biases.
It's like he's created his own reality,
Yeah.
where any information that challenges his worldview is automatically dismissed as fake news.
Right.
And speaking of alternative realities,
Okay.
his economic policies are definitely outside the mainstream.
Right.
He proudly declares his love for tariffs
Really?
and even suggests replacing income tax with them.
Oh, wow.
I mean, who does that?
It's classic Trump,
Yeah.
bold, unconventional,
Right.
and seemingly unconcerned with the potential consequences. Yeah.
He believes that tariffs are a powerful tool to protect American jobs and industries,
Right.
even if it means disrupting global trade and potentially triggering a trade war.
Yeah.
And he argues that his tax cuts and deregulation were hugely successful,
Right.
but that the COVID pandemic threw a wrench in his plans to pay down the national debt.
It's like he's saying, trust me, I'm a businessman. I know how to make a deal.
Right.
But then he turns around and praises Elon Musk and Starlink,
Yeah.
celebrating private sector innovation and efficiency.
Right.
It's almost like he admires Musk's ability to operate outside the constraints of government bureaucracy.
Yeah, it's a fascinating contradiction.
It is.
On one hand, he's a staunch economic nationalist who wants to protect American businesses from foreign competition.
Yeah.
But on the other hand,
Right.
he's a champion of free market capitalism who celebrates individual entrepreneurship and technological disruption.
Yeah.
It's almost like he embodies both the traditional and the futuristic aspects of the American dream. It's a head spinner for sure.
Mm.
And it's hard to pin down exactly where he stands on some issues.
Yeah.
But one thing's for certain. He's not afraid to go against the grain,
Right.
to challenge conventional wisdom,
Yeah.
and to provoke strong reactions.
Yeah.
I mean, who else would say that nuclear proliferation is a bigger threat than global warming?
That statement definitely raised eyebrows.
Yeah.
It reveals his deeply ingrained focus on national security and military strength.
Right.
He sees the world as a dangerous place,
Yeah.
full of hostile actors who want to do America harm.
Right.
And he believes that only a strong leader,
Yeah.
willing to use force if necessary,
Right.
can keep the country safe.
He's painting this picture of America as a fortress under siege,
Yeah.
surrounded by enemies, both foreign and domestic.
Right.
And that ties directly into his obsession with the enemy from within,
Right.
a term he uses to justify his hardline stance on immigration and border security.
Yeah, he claims that other countries are deliberately sending criminals and undesirables to the United States,
Right.
citing figures on murderers and rapists entering the country illegally.
This kind of rhetoric
Does.
plays into deep-seated fears about crime and social instability.
Absolutely.
And it's often used to justify discriminatory policies and the scapegoating of marginalized groups.
It is.
It's a dangerous game he's playing.
Yeah.
And it's one that we've seen repeated throughout history with devastating consequences.
Right.
But it's also a tactic that's proven effective at mobilizing support and consolidating power.
Absolutely.
And speaking of power,
Yeah.
we can't ignore his persistent claims about the 2020 election being stolen.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
repeats these allegations ad nauseum,
He does.
offering various examples of supposed fraud and irregularities.
Right.
He criticizes the use of voting machines,
Yeah.
calls for a return to paper ballots,
Right.
and even claims that judges refuse to hear his evidence.
Right.
These claims have been thoroughly debunked.
Yep.
But they continue to resonate with a segment of the population who are deeply distrustful of the government and the electoral process.
It's a dangerous trend,
It is.
and it undermines the very foundation of our democracy.
Yeah.
When people lose faith in the integrity of elections,
Right.
it creates a breeding ground for extremism and violence.
Absolutely.
And speaking of extremism,
Okay.
Trump's surprising support for RFK Jr. as a potential health advisor is raising a lot of questions.
It's an unexpected alliance, to say the least.
Yeah.
RFK Jr. is a controversial figure,
He is?
known for his outspoken views on vaccines and other public health issues.
Right.
And while Trump claims to admire his willingness to challenge the pharmaceutical industry,
Right.
some critics see it as a cynical attempt to appeal to the anti-vaccine movement.
It's definitely a head-scratcher.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder what Trump's true motivations are.
Right.
Is he genuinely concerned about public health?
Yeah.
Or is he simply using RFK Jr. as a pawn in his ongoing war against the establishment?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But it's worth noting that Trump has a history of embracing fringe figures and conspiracy theories,
Right.
often to the detriment of public discourse and scientific understanding.
It's like he's constantly testing the boundaries,
Yeah.
pushing the limits of what's acceptable.
Right.
And that's part of what makes him so fascinating and so dangerous.
Right.
He's a master manipulator who understands the power of fear, anger, and resentment.
He is.
And he's not afraid to exploit those emotions for his own gain.
It's a sobering thought,
It is.
and it raises a lot of questions about the future of our country.
Yeah.
Can we heal the divisions that he has exacerbated?
Right.
Can we restore faith in our institutions?
Yeah.
And can we find a way to have civil discourse in an age of outrage and polarization?
Those are big questions.
Yeah.
And they're not easy to answer.
Right.
But I think it starts with understanding the appeal of Trump's message.
Right.
Why do so many people find him compelling? What are their fears, their hopes, their grievances?
It's not enough to simply dismiss his supporters as ignorant or racist.
Right.
We need to engage with them,
Yeah.
to listen to their concerns,
Right.
and to try to understand where they're coming from.
It's a tall order, I know.
It is.
But if we want to save our democracy,
Yeah.
we have to start somewhere.
Right.
We have to find a way to bridge the divides,
Yeah.
to have productive conversations,
Mm-hmm.
and to work together towards a more just and equitable future.
And maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
this deep dive into the mind of Donald Trump can help us do just that.
Right.
By understanding his tactics,
Yeah.
his appeals,
Right.
and his worldview,
Yeah.
we can be better equipped to counter his divisive rhetoric and to build a more inclusive and compassionate society.
All right, let's take a breather and let all that sink in
Okay.
when we come back.
Yeah.
We'll explore what this interview tells us about the future of American politics,
Right.
the role of media, and the challenges facing our democracy.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned.